Hi dear students, today let us learn 7th history chapter of 9th standard, that is Europe in the Middle Ages. In this chapter you learn the conditions in Europe during the Middle Ages, the meaning of feudalism, different form of feudalism, the advantages and disadvantages of feudalism. Last, the decline of feudalism. In 395 BC, the classical Roman Empire broke into two parts, namely Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire existed from 395 to 476 BC, and the period of Eastern Roman Empire is 395 to 1453 CE. Romulus Augustus was the last most important ruler of Western Roman Empire. The period between 5th century to 15th century is called the Middle Ages of Europe. After the fall of Western Roman Empire, the Middle Ages begins in Europe and it ends after the capture of Constantinople by Ottoman Turks in 1453. Earlier, the entire medieval period was called as Dark Ages of Europe. Later, the medieval period was divided into three: the beginning, middle and end. After this division, the beginning stage of medieval period is called as Dark Age. In the Roman society, there were two classes known as patricians and plebeians. The rich landlords were called patricians and the poor Romans were called plebeians. The patricians consolidated all political powers in the name of Senate. Slavery existed during the time of Middle Ages in Europe. Slaves were the private property of its owners. The owners of the slaves were robbing the benefits of the slaves' hard works. Slaves did lonely jobs and were ill treated by their owners. All the achievements in the field of art, architecture, culture and philosophy were the result of the works of slaves. Since the slaves were doing all the works, the owners had a free time to indulge in creative works in Middle Ages. With the end of Western Roman Empire, the medieval period starts in Europe. 1,000 years of barrenness appears in Europe after rich cultural contributions by the Greeks and Romans. This period is also called as Dark Ages. This was a period of transition. With the rise of barbaric races, feudalism was born in Middle Ages. The word feudalism emerged from the word feuf, which means a piece of land. Feudalism was a combination of the legal, economic, military and cultural customs that flourished in the medieval Europe between 9th and 15th century. After the fall of classical Roman Empire, the political and social system of many European countries plunged into chaos. The situation in the Middle Ages worsened after the death of Roman Emperor Charlemagne. Anarchy prevailed, and there was no protection for life and property. At such a critical period, a new political and economic system took birth in Western Europe. This was called feudalism. The cultivable land was the base of this system. The farmers cultivating the cultivable land were made part of feudalism. Many restrictions were imposed on the farmers under the feudalism. The farmers were not getting the right result for their hard work. Even while paying the annual rent, the feudal lords were displaying their power unnecessarily on the farmers. Feudal system was a system of land ownership based on political and economical base. In medieval Europe, the status of a person was based on the extent of land he owned. The income from the land was the sole means of earning. The king used to distribute lands to noblemen. Then the noblemen distribute those lands to farmers. In nutshell, the feudal system was designed to fulfill specific services. Feudalism can be called as an agreement between powerful lords and the weak farmers. There were nobles and vassals in the society. The powerful men who owned the land were called nobles, and people who took land from the nobles are called vassals. Protecting the weak vassals was the duty of nobles. For the protection of nobles, the vassals offered few services. Feudal system was based on mutual giving and taking. This feudal system emerged in all classes, organizations and associations during medieval period. By the 8th century, kings started retaining the ownership of land with them and granted only the right to cultivate land to their nobles and vassals. After the 9th century, the grants become hereditary. Most of the churches and small landlords became a part of feudalism. The right of the feudatory rules increased and they become hereditary property. In order to protect granted lands from the division, the system of primogeniture came to effect. Changes further happened within the system and the practice of subgranting of lands continued. The feudatory kings who received a grant of lands from the king further granted the lands to their subordinates. The bonded farmers were the backbone of the entire economy. Nature and forms of feudalism. The land held by the vassals was considered a gift given by the ruler. Feudalism consisted of two important traditions. They were, the first one was investiture. Under this tradition, the Lord gave assurance of justice and protection to the vassals while giving the land. The second one was homage. Under this tradition, the vassals promised loyalty and services to the feudal lords. There were hierarchies among the feudal lords. Important among them were the dukes, earls, barons, knights. The vassals took the help of laborers for agriculture. These laborers were given land sufficient for survival as long as they worked with the vassals. They were not given any monetary returns. Effects of feudalism. Independent farmers had a small portion of land and were paying rent for the land used. Others had to work in small granted lands throughout their life for free. The soldiers were from the ruling class. They had absolute control over military. Hence, both political and economical powers were concentrated in one place. The justice system of the villages were honored in the house of feudal lords. The feudal landlords had to depend on vassals for military human power. This restricted the exploitation of these classes. The power of the barbarians brought under control. The human beings realized their rights and duties under the feudal system. This system encouraged creative output in literature in England, France, and Germany. Rules were formed. The noblemen got trained in these rules. With this nobleman, women and weaker people become the protectors of the Christianity. Feudalism slowly nourished the emergence of cities. The cities become the centers of trade and art craft. New business associations came into existence in these cities. By the 14th century, numerous poor farmers were pushed away from the agriculture. As a result of this system, prominent ruling classes emerged. Clashes took place among the ruling classes, feudal lords and vassals. Due to this problem, the agreements of feudalism broke down. In some cases, feudal lords competed against the rulers themselves. Many become traitors of their own country and become threat to their own regional unity. Judicial system also suffered from lack of uniformity. Moreover, clashes took place between church and the state. The decline of feudalism. The diseases that engulfed the group during 14th century killed over 3.5 crore people, or one-third of population were pushed to death. This is called Black Death in history. With the recurrence of plague periodically, the situation became more severe. This resulted in the loss of agricultural production. Income became less. The demand for the food grains also went down, affecting agriculture. In order to counter the arrestation of the farmers, the feudal lords tried to impose more and more traditional duties on the farmers. This resulted in social unrest. Revolt became common across the Europe. The decline of feudalism led way to the emergence of capitalism in Europe.